Hello and welcome to the CMTV podcast, episode 22. I'm Aubrey Going.
And I'm Alison Kavanagh.
This is our last podcast for this season. We'll be back again in a couple of months, but this is the last episode for season one. So, Ali, what are you going to be talking about today?
I'm going to talk about the crown chakra and our divine purpose.
Oh, okay.
Big
So
one.
pretty big, yes. Literally the crowning subject for this particular season. I'm going to be talking about the nature of muscle imbalance because I think this isn't that well understood. We've talked about elements of it as we've gone along in previous episodes, but I want to tie it together and make it nice and simple. Because again, we've seen a couple of things recently on social media that you're going, yeah, they've got kind of half of the idea, and then they go off in some odd tangent. So we'll discuss that as we go along. Do you want to start off your section then?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So the crown chakra, continuing on our theme of the energy centers, we're on to the seventh energy center. So if we start at the top of the ears and join the fingers at the top of the head, that's the area that we would associate with the crown chakra. It's the seventh energy center, as we mentioned, our crowning glory. When this is open and developed, particularly in, ascended masters and other spiritual teachers, they'll depict this light around the head, and they actually think that this light is emanating from the illumination of this crown chakra.
Okay, so the idea traditionally in religious imagery, you'll see the halo around like saints and things like that.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
so that's where that idea would have evolved from.
originated from.
Okay.
So it's associated with the color violet, but when it's all of the energy centers aligned and each of the individual pools of light blend together, they form this white light. So it can evolve to become like a white or a golden light at the top of the head.
And that always made sense to me when you think about how a prism splits light into its various spectrums that we can see separately.
Yes.
And yet when you combine them, you just get light.
Yeah, white light.
White light.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So this energy center is concerned with our understanding and spirituality. So it's a bit esoteric. It's kind of beyond the physical, but it's our ability to connect with the divine, with pure source energy, and to bring that through into the physical plane.
Okay.
The gland associated with it then is the pineal gland, sometimes called pineal because it's like shaped like a little mini pine cone. So pineal or pineal gland. The physical gland produces melatonin from serotonin, and it's affected by the amount of light entering the eyes. So it's another condition associated with it is seasonal affective disorder.
Okay.
As we have changeover in the different lengths of daylight, this can affect the amount of melatonin produced. So there's low levels in bright light, and then in darker light, there's high levels. So the higher levels of melatonin help us to sleep.
Okay. This is the interplay then between pineal and pituitary, presumably.
Yes.
How these two glands are going to, when working properly, align. Also involved in our circadian rhythms then?
Yes, our
Okay.
sleep-wake cycle
Yeah.
is influenced through melatonin. Even traveling through different time zones will affect the production of melatonin, what we call jet lag. Some people will supplement with melatonin to lessen the effects of jet lag. But another interesting thing about the pineal gland is that they've discovered that there's DMT in the pineal gland. So this is a dimethyltryptamine, and it is piezoelectric in that the molecules can be activated when gentle pressure is applied to them.
Now, a lot of people would think of DMT as the narcotic, but this is endogenous. It's produced in the brain.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in the body.
Yeah, so this isn't like people, I think, typically smoking DMT or.
Well, it's in ayahuasca, it's in psilocybin, it's in various
Okay.
plants. It occurs naturally in nature.
Okay.
But the pineal also produces DMT. So these crystals, when they collide, produce an electric and actually emit light. So gentle pressure on the pineal gland causes this DMT to activate. So this is where breath work comes in, particular types of breath holding that increases a subtle pressure on the pineal can cause increased DMT
Hmm.
and activate it. And even yoga postures, again, things like the headstand and so on,
Yeah.
various forms of forward bends that bring a pressure, a focus into the top of the head can subtly change the pressures within this mini pine cone and get DMT activated.
Mm. And I suppose just for clarity, like a lot of people, because again, a lot of words are open to various interpretations or preconceived ideas about things. When we say crystals, you're talking about crystalline structure. So not necessarily people, particularly I suppose in the complementary alternative therapy world, they think of crystals as in,
Gemstones.
quartz and things like that.
Yeah.
But this is crystalline structures within the gland.
Yeah.
And piezoelectric is a known phenomenon, like it's used to power watches and things like that,
Yes.
that it is the pressure against a crystalline structure
Yeah.
produces that type of a small electrical current.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, like we're not talking about crystals as in crystal healing,
Yes.
although we could say there's some crossover there, that it is what's actually in the gland, crystalline structures within the gland, creating this phenomenon, this piezoelectric response.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea that the pineal and pituitary should work together, should align. In the last podcast, we talked about the pituitary being our purpose in life. And then above that, we have our divine purpose.
Mm.
So if they are connected, aligned, are they match up?
Yeah.
That your purpose of doing what you are here to do is aligned with your divine purpose of bringing more energy into this plane.
Mm.
So things that turn our attention to the pineal gland are really useful for activating the energy center,
Mm.
the crown chakra. So the regular things like being out in nature, they say even being up on a mountaintop and getting a panoramic view, that it expands the perception.
I suppose like an extreme version of that would be what astronauts report, when you're out in space and you talk about extreme perception, like not just top of the mountain, but actually off the planet, that you get this huge panoramic view.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often have to say it's a life-changing experience.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
to realize that there is more than just little me feeling separated and isolated, that there is a divine connection between all things,
Mm.
and that continues beyond even our physical lifetime. So, contemplating spirituality, divinity, um, the awareness of the higher self, the light body, and that unity consciousness.
Mm.
So, having these two aligned, pineal and pituitary, bringing the day to day in line with the eternal purpose,
Mm.
lights up these energy centers and brings enlightenment.
Excellent. I think sometimes when you talk on very large scales like that, it can sometimes be a little bit hard for people to hold that in their mind. And I suppose if you think of it like a microcosm, you could say, well, what you're doing on a particular day should be aligning with what you want to do in life, or at least for that week or that year or whatever time scale you care to apply. So you might say like a single lifetime, achieving your purpose in that lifetime, be like doing the thing you need to do that day, but it should be leading you towards the thing you want to do over the course of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you could take it at that smaller scale, and you'd say, well, if you weren't, you spent a day or a number of days worse doing something that's completely contrary to what you say you want to achieve. You say, I want to be a great footballer, I want to be a great race car driver, and you don't play or you don't drive
Mm-hmm.
for months.
Yeah.
You're not working towards that goal.
Yes.
So if you align those two, what you do day to day will give you the long-term outcome.
Yeah.
So what we do in this lifetime is supposed to align with what we want to achieve more broadly
Mm-hmm.
on a larger scale.
Yeah. And it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. I think sometimes people think that, I have to find my purpose. And it's like you could literally be doing anything and still be in the energy.
Mm.
That it comes from your intention, your approach.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing for the crown chakra to open is being still. Uh, Spending time just with complete silence, which is really challenging with the amount of distractions we have in this day and age. There's so much screen time, there's so much alerts and demands on our attention,
Yeah.
that finding a few minutes just to still the mind, to sit in quietness, to go within,
Mm,
be still and know that I am within. That's one of the doctrines, one of our teachings.
yeah.
And the stillness then allows us to be more present because we have that practice connection with being at ease and being still.
Mm.
And then we can bring that into our day to day, whatever it is that we choose to do.
I think we might have mentioned this before. I know I certainly did in a class recently that I was saying that it doesn't have to be every time you want to do a little bit of meditation or have a little bit of peace and quiet that you have to spend an hour or something, that it can be
A moment.
literally a couple of seconds. That I think sometimes when people are on social media, you think about how many ads pop up these days, particularly if you're watching like a video or something like that. And an ad could be anything from 10 seconds to a minute. And instead of being frustrated about the ad or anything else, you go, okay, well, the ad is on. I'm just going to let go. I'm going to bring my attention into the moment, maybe focus on my breath, whatever mechanism works for you, but that you literally go, I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to switch off my cognitive thinking, rational, and I'm going to focus on myself, my intuitive, my internal, my spiritual, whatever way you want to look at that. But just literally going, oh, this moment now, which I could spend being frustrated or bored, I'm instead going to just take that moment to switch off. I'm taking a break from everything. And the more regularly you do that, God knows there's a lot of ads, but the more regularly you do that, the easier it becomes. And then when you do longer sessions, if you want to do some meditation before you go to sleep at night or first thing in the morning, it's easier because you're doing the little practices.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be a big long thing, but it is important to do that.
On a regular basis,
Mm.
anytime, have a little triggered something that says, okay,
Now,
now I switch off, now I relax.
yeah.
Um, so if there's a lack of connection in this energy center, we'll tend to be more materialistic. We'll only see the physical. We won't see anything beyond our five senses. If I can't see, taste, touch, it doesn't exist for me,
Mm.
which is a very narrow view,
Yeah.
and it can turn down the volume in this energy center.
Mm.
Whereas if we have that more expansive view, that openness, open-mindedness, the ability to perceive other perspectives, that really helps the crown chakra.
Mm.
Um, so we mentioned being still, being present, practicing meditation, also looking at things that inspire you. So that could be looking at artwork, looking at things that give you new ideas to create.
Mm.
Maybe it's the type of podcast you watch, the type of films or you tune into. All of those have subtle influences on us. So instead of choosing doom and gloom, choose things that explore the possibilities of
Yeah.
what our potential has available to us.
You look at the popularity then of things like soaps, and there's long running soaps, and largely you're focusing on conflict, um, you know,
Disease, disagreement.
discomfort, yeah, problems, issues, narcs, fights. It's all a big row.
Yeah,
And you're going, and that's what you choose to have as your mental diet, what you're feeding your brain,
yeah,
when instead you could be looking at, for some people, they might have like an engineering background. So you might be looking at architecture, bridges. For other people, it might be nature, it might be the sea, it might be forest, it might be, just a single tree. Looking at a single tree can be, something you can really connect with and be awe-inspired by, like, oh, wow, isn't that an incredible thing to have just grown from a seed, and look at the intricacy of it and how it's just there existing, and particularly like old trees that you think this has been around for hundreds of years, that whatever it might be, that it could be going to an art gallery, but
yeah,
that's not for everybody.
yeah,
So find the thing that gives you that uplift,
yes,
because you'll know it straight away, because you'll feel
yeah,
that brightness, that inspiration. I mean, the words we use are very connected to that experience of, you'd say, like a lift, a lightness, a brightness. You can think, yeah, opening up your energy centers, tuning in, or even after treatment where people say they feel lighter getting off the table. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, you've set aside some of the
yeah.
stress and conflict for a little while.
Yeah, so the continuous movie that we're playing internally, just taking a break from that,
Mm.
even listening to music, obviously classical music that has particular frequencies and vibrations that open that part of the mind, a bit of Mozart or whatever you choose to watch.
Mm.
And as you said, a nature program, a good maybe David Attenborough, where he really hones in on the intricacies of how things are interrelated,
Yeah.
can be very uplifting.
Mm. Yeah. So depending on what way your mind works. And for some people it is interpersonal things that interest them.
Yeah,
But think more about the light and bright. It's not like you're trying to say that the other things don't exist,
yeah,
but it's, well, what are you primarily focusing on?
yes,
You know, Dad used to always use the analogy of if you're going to one place and saying you're going to another, or, just here in Ireland, because it's like literally top and bottom of the country. It's like you'd say you're going to Belfast, but you're on the road to Cork. And he's like, yeah. So it's not that both of those roads don't exist, or even one is good or the other is bad, or anything like that. It's more, what are you actually focusing on? What are you bringing in? What I think where they talk a lot about now, the evidence that suggests that we create our own reality to a reasonable extent. If you're focused on fight and conflict and discomfort and disease, that is the direction you are going.
yes,
If you focus on the inspiring stuff, the lighter, brighter, the things that light you up, that make you feel happy, excited, again, it's not a denial of those other things. It is a focus on them, which brings more of that into your life. You will create a reality in that direction for yourself.
yeah. So it's nearly righting ourselves. It's like a ship that's off balance. If we're not in connection with both our own nature internally,
Mhm.
and equally disconnected from external nature, we're off kilter. So the stillness, getting into your own body, just casually observing the breath, watching the body take in a breath or let out a breath, just not having any judgment about it,
Mhm.
brings us into the present moment, brings us into that stillness, reconnects us with that reality, that divinity, that divine part of ourselves. And getting out in nature, just being surrounded by forest, by the sea, by any of the living structures that are buzzing with energy, and just, you know, nearly absorbing that, breathing it in,
Mm.
um, helps to harmonize and align all of the energy centers.
Yeah. And I think those things are pretty undeniable, particularly the fresh air thing. Anybody is going to notice the difference between being in a stuffy room where there's not enough oxygen, there's no energy in the space, and then you get out and you walk in nature and you go, oh, there's an ease, a lightness, a vitality.
Yeah,
The contrast is so strong, it's really quite undeniable.
yeah,
And if you don't agree, try it. Try being in a stuffy room and then go outside and breathe fresh air away from any kind of like traffic noise and things like that. Like try to get out in nature if you can and compare the difference for yourselves.
yeah, absolutely. And even, take off the shoes and socks, walk along the beach, get in a little bit of grounding if you can while you're there.
Hmm.
I know when I'm going on a walk, even in a local park, I'll take off the shoes and socks and roll up the trousers and, get
Walk
connected.
barefoot on the grass. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And as I said, it just has a very calming, aligning effect that we can get so caught up and pressured with our thoughts. And you have to remind yourself the world keeps turning. It goes on, no matter how big we think our problems are,
Mm.
it nearly puts things into perspective for us.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is when you do those walks, get off the path. Because you notice a difference if you walk a lot and you're walking on pavement, you're walking on concrete, you're walking on tarmac, you're walking on a hard surface, your feet get tired much more than if you were walking on grass, if you're walking on a surface that actually has a little bit of give.
Mm.
And so walking barefoot is much more comfortable if you're on grass or sand or something like that, something that has a little bit of give. Whereas I think a lot of people, times when people go walking in the park, they'll walk the paths.
Yes.
It's like get off the path. Even in your footwear, you'll feel a difference
Yeah.
walking on a natural substance rather than a man-made thing. And better still if you take off the footwear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So anything else then you think might help?
Um,
So being still, being present, practice meditation, look at things that inspire you. And I think looking at things with a fresh eye as well. So sometimes even things in your environment, you become unaware of. You know, you develop a bit of a blind spot. So, like looking at a tree in your garden, looking at the grass in the garden, looking at whatever it might be, clouds in the sky, looking at your living space.
Yeah.
Even appreciating design aspects of your furniture, God knows what it might be, but look at things with a curious eye.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's just being aware of the beauty in things,
Mhm.
that there's just a beauty and a perfection in even the arrangement of petals in a flower, that there's just that appreciation for the amazingness of the beauty of nature.
Mm.
And that brings in then the divine and the connection and that feeling of wholeness. We're not separate, we're not isolated. At a certain level, everything is connected. The body will move into harmony, into alignment once given a chance. When we stop all the stress, all the worry, all the pressure, our natural energy can flow freely, and it knows how to fix things and keep them working harmoniously.
Yeah. Excellent. Anything else on that subject before we talk a little bit about muscle imbalance?
Let's talk about muscle imbalance.
Okay. Speaking of, appreciating the beauty of things, the intricacy, I think understanding how the body works just on a simple mechanical level still has a fascinating, beautiful architecture to it that's incredibly intricate and is at work all the time. We only notice it when it's dysfunctional. And I suppose this is in response to a reel I saw the other day. Again, trying to avoid frustration, non-judgment, but there's some things that we look at and we'd say there is the person maybe in a comment or in a video or something, they'll start off pointing something out that you go, oh, okay, that's right, that's good, that's true. And then they'll veer off and you go, oh, so close. So I think if we understand these things about muscle imbalance patterns, and they are patterns because there are more and less efficient ways for us to do things in the world. The normal movements that we do day to day, muscles are designed to move in a particular way. And when we do too much of that action, it's very predictable. Like we tend to, the example we gave is, reaching forward for things. You don't tend to reach back as much. So the muscles that do that are going to get more used. They're more likely to get tight. And then their opposing muscles are likely to get weak. But I do think that there's two elements to the process that we talk about of muscle imbalance. There is both a fascial component where connective tissue can get stuck, and then there's a neurological component where nerves can either get irritated or it becomes nearly a learned postural habit, a way of working around something that may not even be there. The classic thing of breaking your ankle and then being on crutches, and the knock-on effect like that could last beyond the time that the tissue has healed. So I suppose, first of all, to talk about fascia, we've talked about this before, I think. I'm not sure if we've used this. I always think this illustrates quite well. This is just like a wrapping for a bottle, but it's kind of like a lattice type arrangement. But in muscles, we talked about anterior tibialis before. We said that's the classic example of a muscle that tends to be quite overstretched most of the time. And that's down to neurology. But then the fascia will start to be affected by that. So we can see this lattice has the ability to either stretch across its length or stretch along its length. So you can imagine when we see it all opened up like this, as the muscle shortens, it thickens. You can feel this on your bicep if you bend your arm. As that thickens, the available length on these fibers is taken up by this widening process, that it's increasing its diameter along its, if you like, its x-axis. So when it does that, you'll see it gets shorter at either end.
Mm-hmm.
So some muscles get stuck in this shortened position, but muscles like anterior tibialis get stuck in this long position. Now you can see the gaps disappear when I pull. All of the available movement is taken up with lengthening. Now, fascia is endlessly more involved and complicated than this because this is one layer. So we can imagine on the outer layer of a muscle that we actually have several of these, and they work by sliding out almost in a telescope type manner. If you think like sliding apart the components in a telescope, or a car aerial is the other example we oftentimes give. So when they're slid out and the fibers are close together like that, if we don't really move them very much, there is a process of adhesion that takes place, sticking together between fibers. Now when the muscle tries to shorten, these fibers are stuck together, so they can't move this way. So it's difficult for the muscle to move back into its compartment. It's kind of squeezed in its own wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
And as we said, that compresses lymphatic vessels. It means that metabolites like lactic acid can't get out of the muscle. They start to accumulate. And in the case of anterior tibialis, we'll get like shin splints.
Mm-hmm.
So one is that fascia being stuck along. In other cases, like in our bicep, where we have our arms bent a lot, the fascia tends to stick more in a shortened position.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about the short muscle, it's like the telescope has been closed and now we've got rust between the layers. So it can't really lengthen properly. So as a result, when we try to lengthen, it'll do other things like shove our arm bone up and create impingement, or roll our scapula and create winging of the scapula and forward head, forward shoulder postures. So the fascia has to be free to move. It tends to get stuck in different positions. We can even take a quick look at this, that if we use our trusty 3D for medical, we can see our muscle illustration here. And we'd say this is the kind of the outer layer of fascia, what would be called the epimysium. Now, again, this is shown as one layer, where in reality, this is multiple layers made up of fibers.
Yeah.
When we go down, we see the next organizational layer. So we see this perimysium surrounding bundles of muscles. And when we get down to individual muscle fibers, we see that we have this endomysium wrapping around these. And these again have multiple layers that can stick at any stage. So it just shows how those things can kind of glue together. So when we have things like muscle length patterns, we can see here posterior tibialis. We've just been talking about anterior tib, but this is posterior tibialis. If we look at the movement of posterior tibialis, it is an inverter of the foot. So when we perform inversion, let's just move that up a little bit. When the muscle is constantly getting overused, it gets short and tight, and the foot gets stuck in this turned in position. And we said we see this a lot in class and in clinic, that when you bend the client's knee, you'll see the foot is not only turned in, because that could be anterior and posterior tibialis, but it tends to be rolled in and the toes are pointed towards the ceiling. So it's in an inverted plantar flex position. And that's pretty dysfunctional, because it means its antagonistic muscle here, anterior tibialis at the front, tends to get a little bit more overstretched, and then muscles not shown here. Let's go back to our main image. We have the peroneal muscles. We have peroneus brevis down here, low on the leg. If we add in a layer, we'll see peroneus longus kind of overlapping it. So of those four muscles, the peroneals tend to get weak, the anterior tibialis gets weak, and posterior tibialis gets short and tight. And we see that time and time again. It's a very common pattern when we look at, oh, I forgot to transition. We were looking at it and we weren't showing our anatomy. Let's run through that again real quick. So we said with the individual muscles, we have posterior tibialis here. When we look at its motion, it is an inverter of the foot. So we see it turning in. Let's just pause that there. So it tends to get short and tight, turning the foot in and plantar flexing. Anterior tibialis tends to get weak and inhibited, and so do the muscles on the outside here. Our peroneus longus. If we remove a layer, we'll see the next one, peroneus brevis. But we were also looking then at our muscle compartments, or sorry, our fascial layers. So we said the muscle has this outer layer. This is the epimysium, our perimysium. Oops, keep zooming in too far. And our endomysium there, surrounding individual bundles. So like there's so many different layers of fascia within the muscle, and each of these layers can become stuck to each other. So I think that's a major element of dysfunction that contributes to this kind of predictable pattern of dysfunctions that we tend to see, the sticking of fascia. But then the second component is the neurological part. And muscles get accustomed to a particular length. And so that becomes the norm, if you like. But also we've talked about the process of reciprocation, where as one muscle increases its tone, its opposite muscle is being told by the nervous system to decrease its tone. It's becoming neurologically inhibited. And I think these two aren't terribly well understood. The example that we're going to give, if we just look at a quick still, because this is kind of about the, we can see here, TFL, little small muscle, seemingly kind of insignificant on the outside of the hip, but it has this long tendon that is part of the overall fascial wrapping of the thigh. And this thickening within that outer membrane of the thigh is called the IT band, because it's going from the ilium to the tibia. So we've IT, iliotibial band. So the video I saw, they were talking about how TFL tends to get short and tight. And I was going, correct, good. And they said that people who spend their time foam rolling up and down this IT band are kind of wasting their time. And that's true. Not to say foam rolling doesn't have its benefit. Foam rolling does help to compress and decompress, which helps to increase local tissue hydration when it's done well, shouldn't be painful. If you're going to roll your IT band, I think you're kind of wasting your time. But if you're rolling other tissues, it should be gentle. It should not be painful, and you should be controlling your weight on the roller. But the IT band being kind of a fascial layer, you're not really going to change the tensile load, the stress on it, unless you do something about TFL. You try and get length back into TFL. So good so far. They were talking about foam rolling the IT band really doesn't work. The problem is with TFL. And I was thinking, oh, that's great. Nice, accurate information. Hurrah, well done. But then they went on to say that the shortness in TFL is caused by an anterior pelvic tilt and an internal rotation of the femurs. I was going, okay, you do see some people with an anterior pelvic tilt. I think it's actually that we spend too long sitting. TFL is a hip flexor. The more we flex, the tighter it gets, the stronger it gets, the more it's able to overpower other muscles and affect the movement of the joint. But they were saying that it's short and tight because of this postural dysfunction. It's like, I think it's the other way around because muscles pull bones. So that's one thing. The other thing is we don't see people with internally rotated femurs as much as we see people with externally rotated femurs. They tend to, when they lie on the table, their knees will roll out. Even standing straight up, a lot of people, their knees will be slightly turned out or their feet will be slightly turned out. So external rotation is a more common problem. That's not to say people aren't sometimes internally rotated. You do see people walking with that kind of pigeon-toed, where they refer to that, where the toes are kind of turned in. So it does happen, but it's not the more common dysfunction. So far I'm going, no, don't quite agree with that. But then the solution was to lie on your side in what they call like a 90-90 position, like the bottom leg is flexed, the leg you're trying to affect is extended. And they said, put your leg on a roller and internally rotate. And you're like, well, that's a strengthening exercise against gravity for TFL. It's an internal rotator. So why are you strength training a muscle that's tight? You should be stretching it. And the rationale that was given is, oh, this will train glute medius and minimus. And you're going, okay, but it's training the fibers of those muscles to the front. That would be helpful maybe to have a quick look at glute medius minimus. We might go back to our 3D for Medical app. Actually put it on screen this time. And if we change our tabs back to the full body, we'll see glute medius and minimus are up in the pelvis. Oops. Sometimes the model likes to do its own thing. Now, if we start adding in muscles, we'll see glute minimus. When we add in another layer, glute medius. Now, the fibers to the front are pretty much going the same direction as TFL. If we put TFL in, you'll see it kind of mirrors that. So TFL going up like this from the outside of the hip up to the greater trochanter. Let's take it out again and look at the fiber direction for glute medius. The anterior fibers of medius and minimus are kind of doing the same thing, but you'll see it's kind of fan shaped. So the front of the muscle tends to get short and tight because it is kind of assisting in hip flexion. It's the back that tends to get weak. So even still, the movement that was demonstrated in that particular reel was strength training these forward fibers, which tend to be short and tight.
Presumably, if you release tight muscles first, get them to a normal resting length, then you could strength train them.
Yes, and this is a well-known, well-documented process that while the weak muscles are being neurologically inhibited, so to put that simply, we'd say the tight muscles at the front, the brain is telling the muscles at the back, relax, reduce your tension. So trying to strength train them in that circumstance is a real uphill struggle. So this is a known thing. You should treat tight muscles before treating weak. You should stretch tight muscles before attempting to strength train the weak ones. You'll be much more successful. It's not that you can't do it the other way, but you're unnecessarily battling uphill. If you actually did the tight muscles first, restore resting length, then those weak muscles with strength training come back online a lot quicker and a lot easier because they're no longer being neurologically inhibited. So yeah, that's a known concept in most forms of rehab, physical therapy, manual therapy would all say the same thing. So I thought it was just a particularly bizarre approach that highlighted how people don't understand the basics. The basics are the reason you stretch is to restore normal resting length to muscles. Everything else is a benefit, like increased circulation, better flexibility, better joint movement, joint centration. Those are outcomes. The actual reason for stretching is to restore normal resting length, because tight muscles don't go back to their normal resting length.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've done that, weak muscles can now be strength trained, tonified, and now we get back to the position of balance. Once balanced, we said muscles can be stretched and strengthened.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're starting from a point of dysfunction, you gotta stretch the tight muscles first, strength train the weak.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I would say is it's a common thing in textbooks, and this kind of comes back to the difference between stuck fascia versus actual muscle tightness, tension, increased tone, which is a function of the nervous system. And we do in our advanced body work, we will teach people how to differentiate between these. Basically, muscle length tests and muscle strength tests. So people involved in manual therapy will be familiar with the Thomas test, which is a length test for the hip flexors. But then we can strength train them by having the client hold the leg up and we push down and see can they hold strong. And that will give you an indication of what is the nature of the problem here. Because we talked about with our groin strain video, we just saw the clip there, we were looking at the IT band. That groin strain video comes out on Watch HCD in the next couple of weeks. And the idea of the typical view that people have is adductors are tight. We just saw how that fascia is functioning. And I would say that for most people, because they don't bring their leg out very often, the fascia gets stuck. But the muscles actually tend to get weak unless you're doing some specific strength work or your sport, like kicking across your body to kick a ball, something like that. Unless you're doing some specific work for your adductors, they tend to get weak.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you will still see the limited range of motion because the fascia is stuck. So if we understood these two components, the neurological component and the fascial component, we'd be in a much better position to evaluate what's going on with each muscle and then do the appropriate treatment. But the idea that you can strength train a tight muscle and improve the condition is just inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
Because we'd always say there's no such thing as right or wrong in body work, there is more or less effective. To me, if you go strength training your TFL in that circumstance, you will get short-term benefits because you're creating new neural input. But in the longer term, you are going to tighten up an already tight muscle. And I think this is what confuses people, that you can sometimes get short-term benefit by just rubbing an area. You'll stimulate a lot of mechanoreceptors, you'll get increased blood flow, but you haven't really dealt with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It is putting a band-aid over it. Oh, great, yeah, now. But you're still not helping the body to get back to its ideal balance.
Yeah, interesting.
That all make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Anything else to add then before we wrap up?
No, just practice relaxation, be present, get out in nature, switch off the devices for a while.
Yes, it's one thing to know something, it's another thing to actually put it into practice. So put it into practice. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, I'd like to thank you for watching. And this is, as we said, the end of season 1. We will be back in a couple of months with season 2. So lots more to enjoy, lots more to come. So stay tuned.
Have a good
Thanks for
time.
watching. Thanks very much, folks. We'll see you again soon.